We are Fandom Roulette.
Two nerds with a passion for
History,
video games,
tabletop games,
and, well, really any nerdy stuff that comes into our lives.
While we might not be able to name every ship classification in Star Wars,
Or every Pokemon.
or every spell in the player's handbook,
Well, one of us can.
we're still here to have a good time. Hey everyone, welcome to Fandom Roulette. This is Joe.
And I'm Cody.
And on Fandom Roulette, this is a podcast where we talk about a myriad of nerdy things, including such things as history, video games, tabletop role-playing games, and whatever nerdy stuff we feel like talking about on the podcast. Man, this is weird. We're like back in our normal routine swing of things.
Yeah, and...
Yeah. Although last episode was a lot of fun.
Oh, I enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah,
that was a good episode.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We need. I feel like more guests are in the future. Perhaps I don't
What?
actually know.
Madness.
Yeah, I know, right? Like a podcast does.
What? I don't know what those are.
We're getting legit up in here.
No, that's not me.
That's fair. All right, never mind. It's gonna continue to dive.
It's gonna continue to dive bomb into obscurity.
Hell yeah! Hey, Kai, what stuff have you been up to this week or these past couple of weeks?
A lot. I finished Fire Emblem finally.
Oh,
yeah, I put about 80 hours
emblems?
into my first playthrough.
Okay.
And
Who did you romance?
I romanced Manuela. It was the only romance option in my head that like made sense, because I do feel like the main character in Fire Emblem is kind of like not a legitimate person, you know?
Okay.
Like you're just kind of like you're just kind of there. Like you don't have a personality. You're basically just trying to, like, hit all the right options, but you're not, like... The only thing you ever find out is that, like, your heart doesn't beat for some reason. Question mark. Okay. And I don't know if that's, like... I don't know. Beats the hell out of me. But either way, there was only one, like, romance option that was, like... You know what? I could see this, like, kind of working out. And it was cute, because, like, at the end, they do kind of, like, a post-credits, like... Basically, like, a note card of all the players that, like, lived through your game.
Okay.
And so it's, like, you know, main guy, blah, 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 and, like, all the different side characters. And I kind of was expecting this almost, like, romance thing where, like, all of the players got together, because I got all of their, like, options all the way up to max, basically. Okay. And it actually was surprising. It kind of... It doesn't go like, oh, everyone just hooks up with everybody because there was enough people for that. It's like, two of the guys, like, they don't necessarily, like, fall in love, but they, like, spend the rest of their lives together, basically, like, being bros and, like, one-upping each other until they died. And, yeah, and then there was, like, two other friends, and they were, like... They both just happened to, like, go to similar areas, and they just lived the rest of their lives, like in, like, together. And it was super cute, but it, like, didn't necessarily need to be, like, romantic.
That's nice. That sounds like a very Gimli, Legolas situation.
Yeah, and it was super fun like that. And the game was rad. It's crazy to me because there are technically, like, 4 different stories that you can play through. Like, all of them kind of have the same beginning.
Sure.
But then there's, like, a point in the game where it just drastically changes. And I'm going to probably play through it one more time before I kind of put it to bed and, like, you know, just leave it in, like, the, you know, in my brain space for a while. Because 80 hours is a lot of time to put into a game.
That is true. That's a couple of days.
Yeah, and so there was that, and I picked up Control for the PS4, and that's a kind of weird X-File-y third-person shooter? Metroidvania? kind of a thing. You play, the main character is this woman named Jessie who's been looking for her brother, and these like government suit types like took him away a long time ago because they basically experienced some like supernatural event. I'm being super vague on purpose because the game's super weird and a lot of the fun of the game is like learning about what the fuck's going on. But
yeah.
It's super fun. The game, like, I think the only thing that I'm like kind of bummed about is I picked it up on the PS4 and it runs not great on the PS4.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah, like, I think we're at a point now where the PS4 just isn't doing it anymore, and like the games that are coming out when they want to like cross-platform, they never work as well as like the PC can. I know there's some instances where that's not the case and it's actually better to play it on the console, but the game is super like laggy when there's like big fights that show up and like weird kind of glitchy effects that I don't know. I don't necessarily want to return it, but I almost want to wait for like a sale and try to pick it up on the PC and see if I have a better go at it. But
yeah.
And then of course the usual D&D stuff. We had kind of like a little mini session last week, sort of. Basically, it's just kind of like story stuff. But yeah, that was my 2 weeks. What about you?
Oh man, I also got up to a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So, thing the first, I watched the film Shazam. It was
Shazam!
Do you know about Shazam?
I do know about the Shazam. I was curious how that movie was going to play out and like how people liked it, but I heard literally nothing.
It was fun. I
good
feel
campy superhero movie?
It was a good campy superhero movie. It was
Perfect.
Emotionally affecting. It had a lot of heart. It was a Christmas movie.
Weird.
That came out in like fucking February or March, I want to say.
Huh.
Because Warner Brothers is a mess.
Well, yeah. I mean, what can you do about that?
Honestly, I think like the thing about it, the real bummer is that it's like the reputation of the preceding DC films, I think, really did it a disservice. Like, you know, like they're building up their own little universe over there, and it's actually kind of starting to get fun in a weird way.
Well, that's cool. But I'm happy for them. I know they had a rough go at it at the start because they wanted to just be like the Marvel Cinematic Experience, and I just don't think it's worth it at this point.
Well, I mean, so many people tried it, right?
Yeah.
And like, I think, so I feel like there was like so many weird like things that were going wrong for everyone else. And so part of you wonders, like, did Marvel catch its perfect lightning in a bottle? Or like, what happened? And I think it was because like, this kind of stops being true later in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it's like, those first films were disconnected enough that like, but it felt like DC was like really leaning in, like, they're all here now. And it was like, and then they were like, I remember reading a review for Batman vs. Superman. Did you ever see that flick?
No, I just heard that it was so bad from coworkers that like, I don't know, and I've seen like videos explaining why it's bad, and I don't even know if I want to give it a shot at this point.
There was like a section like later on in the movie, and like I don't remember, so like I literally don't remember if it was like Bruce Wayne giving this to Wonder Woman or Wonder Woman giving this to Bruce Wayne, but it was like a flash drive, and on the flash drive they had like literally the logos of superheroes that you recognize. And then you would click on them, and then it would be like 30-second clips of like a guy running fast, and then like a guy underwater breathing without a helmet on, and then a guy turning into a robot arm. And this review I was reading was like, so they treated it like it was a threat, right? Like, here, these fucking movies are coming, whether you like it or not. Whereas like with Marvel, it's like, oh, that's the fucking Captain America shield. I am excited about that because Captain America.
Yeah, it was kind of, they were subtle nods. I mean, sometimes they hit you over the head when it came to like the later movies, but yeah, I don't think we realized right away that the Marvel movies were going to combine in such a way. Like, usually it was just like, here's that subtle little nod that maybe there's a Thor movie coming, and you're like, cool.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't like Tony Stark sitting there like fucking eating a sandwich with Thor being like, hey, you ready for the Avengers movie? Bum bum, and then like that's the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Although
yeah, exactly.
I would enjoy that too. But
well, who's gonna do it now?
Right?
Spoilers. So sticking on the theme of comic books, so if you have I don't know how universal this is, but my friend told me about this thing. Here's a shameless plug for your local library.
What?
There is a program that is like, I don't know like how far reaching it is, but it's called Hoopla.
Hoopla.
Yeah.
That sounds like a load of hoopla to me.
It is a load of hoopla, and you can also get a lot of really good comics on it.
Nice.
So I've just been reading a lot of comic books.
Hell yeah. I know there's a lot of or at least libraries are trying to keep up with like the digital age. I know right before I left the town, like the town that I lived in last year ish had a library thing going on where you could, kind of Netflixy sort of, or I'm sorry, not like the streaming service Netflix, but like what Netflix initially was, like the rent a movie. Yeah. And I think they were trying. It was weird, but yeah, I think public libraries are at least trying to kind of keep with the modern times. It's kind of hard to imagine going to a public library, at least for me, these days.
Yeah. And I mean, so yeah, I've been getting lots of fun comics. And then the last thing.
Yes?
I started watching the Netflix Dark Crystal Age of Resistance television program.
See, I didn't grow up with Dark Crystal, so I'm not as jazzed as everybody else seems to be, but how is it?
I'm enjoying it.
Cool.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things, which is one, it's gorgeous. 'Cause like it is, I would say like 95% like puppetry, I would say.
Damn, like, that's a show.
Yeah, it's really cool. And it sounds like where they used CGI the most was like the puppeteer might have been in the screen or in the shot, and then they could use like CGI to like digitally remove the puppeteer.
Oh, cool. So there's a lot of almost practical effects, including the puppetry, rather than like
exactly.
Star Wars Episode 1, where everyone was just on a green screen.
Yeah, so like everything's tangible, and like you can like reach out, like
can you reach out?
They built reach out and touch face.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really cool. I will say my biggest gripe with it, and I've been like I've been theorizing about like how I wanted to phrase this like literally all day. Is because I don't want it to sound like condescending or anything like that. I feel like there's a problem with television, and that it's that television, at least in terms of like the streaming services, is like living without fear.
Weird. Tell me more.
If that makes sense. So like when Netflix is like, "Hey, we're producing a television show," you get 10 episodes.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
And like there's no like you have to like make a pilot that you have to like present to like Netflix, and then Netflix has to like debate on whether or not they want it. So it's like, hey, we have 10 episodes no matter what. So like we're just gonna like take our time setting everything up. And so it's like the first episode and like a half, like sometimes felt like it was dragging its feet a little bit.
Okay, a little slower than you're liking.
And I mean, it was good character stuff.
Sure.
But, like, I was like, I want to know what the point is, you know?
Yeah, I think they do. TV shows in general have a very, much like the internet, you have a very short window to get all your cards out on the table to get people interested. And it sucks on one hand because it's like, sometimes you need that time to develop like certain characteristics and certain like story elements because maybe there's a lot going on and maybe this isn't just a 10 episode thing. They're pushing for like the 2-3 season thing. And so they're doing the long game. But, you know, that doesn't hold the attention of a modern day viewer anymore, which is kind of sad in its own regard. A show that I watched that also felt a little like that was Traveler. Or Travelers. It was Travelers.
That sounds cool. Oh, is that another Netflix?
It's a Netflix one. They just came out with season 3 a little while ago. And I just finished that. And I felt like there were some, like, there were very slow episodes where they're, like, developing these characters and stuff. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. But, like, I'm such in that modern day sense where it's like, but get me to, like, the cool part where they got to drive a truck filled with bombs or whatever.
Yeah. I remember, like, listening to Michael Schur, who was the guy who did, like, Parks and Rec and some of The Office and, like, The Good Place and, like, all those good comedies, say once that, like, he never wants to go over to, like, Netflix or Amazon. Like, he really wants to stick with network television. And he said one of the reasons is that there's something really interesting about working for network TV, which is that you have to cut yourself. And so he's like, you know, like, oh, people are talking about, it's like, hey, like, we could put all 40 minutes of jokes, like, into an episode, but, like, when I do my 20-minute episode TV cut, like, I know that I'm putting out the 20 funniest minutes that we have.
Yeah, it forces you to, I think a lot of people, I know me specifically, when I'm making something, if I have tighter restrictions on myself, I tend to create better. Yeah. Because otherwise, my head, because in art school, this is gonna go back to a little bit. A lot of the times, what they wanted you to do for any given project for graphic design is like, all right, you need to pump out 40 different designs, but you're probably only gonna pick like 5 of them. And for me, that was so hard because it was basically just a free-for-all. Like, go, fucking do whatever, make a logo, blah. And I always made, like, when they're like, yeah, do 40, I would do 20 because in my head I'm like, I'm already restricting myself because I want those roughs to be better so that, like, when I'm picking from those 20, I know that's, like, the best that I got. But that was always never, like all my teachers were like, no, stop it. Fuck, quit it. Your 40th design might be your best, but I've always been in that mindset of, like, restricting myself and, like, cutting, you know, like, just kind of focusing in on the thing that I really want out of it.
Yeah.
And I can't be the only one who feels that way, so I feel like with Netflix, at least as I understand it, I don't claim to be an expert of how Netflix does their TV shows or anything, but it sounds like they got a lot of room to play, and that might not be great for everybody. Like, that's cool. Like, some people might thrive on that kind of energy, you know? Mm-hmm. But it might not work for everybody, and maybe that's why certain Netflix shows are, like, flops, whereas some of them are just like, oh my god, this is amazing. You know, it's just different strokes for your, you know, your writers, directors, and all that jazz.
Yeah, and, like, part of me, like, you know, kind of appreciates, like, you know, maybe a slower first episode, because it's like, you know, like, the Lord of the Rings first book chapter is, like, super, the first couple chapters are kind of slow and building and plotting, but at the same time, I'm in, like, the Dark Horse show, I was like, come on, get to the point. But that being said, it's a really cool show, and I highly recommend it.
Very nice.
And puppets are cool, and puppets are better than computers. I'm just gonna say it.
Nice.
But anyways, on to that good content.
What are we learning today in history?
Today in history, we're talking about. I'm calling this, so it's gonna be like a over 2 week segment.
Oh,
it's gonna be called A Tale of Two Anthology Shows.
Neat.
Do you know what an anthology show is, Cody?
If memory serves, an anthology is a collection of stories that may or may not be tied together.
Yeah, so in like in a book, or like in book form, like anthologies are usually collections of short stories, that, like you said, sometimes might follow a central theme.
Yeah.
So for instance, George R. R. Martin does these things called mosaic novels, where he and his friends like write stories about superhero RPG characters that they play.
That sounds fucking rad.
Yeah, they're kind of interesting. I started reading one once, and then I like my Nook died. I have bad luck with e-readers. But that's another story for another day, I think. And then in the other sense, like anthologies will like follow a certain theme or things like that. And in the case of television, one of the big things about anthology shows is that every episode is a different set of characters, a different story, and in some cases, like a whole different set of actors for every episode. So we're talking about one of the biggest anthology shows of the late 50s, early 60s, The Twilight Zone.
Holy shit! I just started watching that. I actually just watched the first 2 episodes last week.
What do you think?
I loved it.
Yeah, it's rad.
The first one, like, fucked me up a little bit. Like, in my head, like, I was just like, damn, that would suck. And then the second one was, like, neat.
Yeah. So I think that sometimes the Twilight Zone gets a bad rap.
For what?
I think lots of people...
Who said that? I'm coming for you.
Not in the sense that I think like a lot of people, it's a really interesting show because like I think a lot of people think of it as like a horror show first and foremost, or like kind of like sci-fi horror, if you will.
I mean, I guess you can see that theme because of like how the show presents itself, but like at the same time, like it's not. I don't know. Like the first 2 episodes aren't scary. Or, they're not even about... I mean, they have scary thoughts, like, scary theming.
Yeah.
But it's not like... It's the horror that I enjoy, if you could even call it that, which is, like, the thematic horror of, like, here's what it would be like in this terrible situation. Because, like, jump scares just, like, get my heart going, and then, like, I'm mad about it.
I will agree with that.
So, like, I guess it's a kind of horror, but it's not like the Friday the 13th, like, jump scare, I'm gonna throw a machete at you and cut off your head and leave your head on a tree. I don't know why I got so specific.
No, I think that's a smart thing. But there are also episodes that are, like, very light, and they're very fun, and there's like a Christmas episode where like a guy finds out he's Santa Claus,
Oh,
like,
fuck yeah. Like I want that one.
But yeah, so the Twilight Zone, I'm going to talk a little bit about the man himself and about the show in general as well. And there's a couple quotes I wanted to read to people. So the first one comes from Rod Sterling himself. So Rod Sterling was the guy who was the creator of it. He's also the guy that appears at the beginning and the end of every episode, who's like wearing the cool suit, and he like gives a little narration, and then he always ends it with The Twilight Zone. And so he was a guy who had always loved like pulp fiction, he like, those little dime store novels that don't really exist anymore, but they were like cheap and they were kind of gimmicky, and he really loved them as a kid. And he had started writing plays, he had worked in radio, but he really wanted to get into television. And so he writes a pilot for a show that was called The Arena. And so apparently it was like a conversation between a group of senators, and he was really mad at the censorship that he would often find on television. So this is a quote from Rod Serling himself. I was not I was not permitted to have my senators discuss any current or pressing problem, he said of the 1957 Studio One production of The Arena, intended to be a look into contemporary politics. To talk of tariff was to align oneself with the Republicans. To talk of labor was to suggest control by the Democrats. To say a single thing germane to the current political situation was absolutely prohibited. And I think that this kind of irked him, because he was a man who was very anti-war. He was very anti-racist and racism.
Yeah, I like it.
He was anti-fascism in a big way. And so he, I think, was kind of frustrated by the fact that he wasn't allowed to like take stands or take, put out big scary ideas like that on television. But
I mean, to be fair, if you think about it, he was also probably mad because he wanted to make a show and they were just like, sure, but nah.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I want to make a contemporary show about contemporary politics. And they're like, sounds nice, but like, nah.
Yeah, go.
Like, oh, cool.
Yeah, do contemporary politics from the past. So like, wait, what?
Yeah, right. But anyway, so he had worked on a number of different shows. He worked on a show called The Time Element, which he thought was going to end up being a weekly anthology series. But he really caught fire from a little show starting in 1959 called The Twilight Zone. And so basically, one of the other really cool things about The Twilight Zone is the fact that he was able to hire a lot of pretty prominent sci-fi writers at the time. So people like Ray Bradbury, Charles Beaumont, George Clayton Johnson, among others, were writing stories. Also, people like Ambrose Bierce, or rather, these are classic writers. We had adaptations of stories from the likes of people like Ambrose Bierce, Jerome Bixby, John Collier, Louis Paget, amongst others as well. But, so the whole kind of aspect of this weird history season is how people could use science fiction to, or rather, how we can use science fiction to look on the past, or rather, to look at how people from the past viewed themselves. So we sort of see a few kind of common themes going through his stories. One of the big ones is nuclear war. This was a show that was coming out in the late 50s and early 60s when the constant threat of nuclear annihilation was kind of hanging over everyone. So one of the famous ones, man, I don't want to talk about any of the plots now that you're watching it for the first time.
I mean, don't tell me the episode name. I'll be fine.
Sure. Okay. So there's one where there's a gentleman who all he wants to do is read, and basically the world is destroyed and he's really sad. Then he finds a library and he's finally going to be happy.
Yeah.
And then his glasses break.
No.
Another one is another big theme in his works was looking at mob mentality.
Okay.
So this one is actually one of the coolest episodes of television I think I've ever seen.
Nice.
And the premise of the episode is that there is a news report of a flying saucer that has been seen in the sky, and it's one city block, and all of the power goes out, so all the people are coming outside and kind of talking to one another. What's up with this? What is anything weird? And one of the little kids goes, well, it's the spacemen, obviously. And then suddenly, like, neighbor A's lights get turned on. And why is your power back? Are you an alien? And then his power goes out. And then someone else's car starts. Well, are you an alien? And it starts that, they all start fighting with one another and destroying one another and things like that. And the final shot is that there are two aliens standing on a hill watching. It says, all you have to do is turn off the power for a few hours and they'll become so paranoid that they'll start fighting themselves.
Damn.
And so that one is, about the whole, during the late 50s, early 60s, the whole concept of anyone could be a Russian spy or a communist spy.
Yep, that's it.
And so we were all fighting one another. The last other ones include McCarthyism, which, similarly with the with the one about people fighting one another. But another big thing that he fought against was racism and bigotry and things like that. So, for instance, there's an episode called "I Am the Night, Color Me Black," which was a parable. It was like a town in the South, I believe, and basically the racism of the town creates this gigantic black cloud that hangs over the entire town and starts doing evil things. And so it's the racism of the town that starts driving it. So one of the big things about Sterling was that he saw fantasy, he saw fiction, he saw writing as a way to make us confront the nasty things about ourselves. A little bit about him. He was born in Syracuse, New York, he was a Jewish kid, and he always loved writing. He was often considered by some of his teachers to be unruly and kind of a class clown, but basically he graduated from high school and he enlisted in service for World War II. He actually fought in the Battle of Luzon, the Battle of Leyte, and he was part of the occupation force of Japan. He was awarded some such things as the Purple Heart. He had Valor medals, a Bronze Star, things along those lines. But when he came back, he decided that he wanted to get into telling stories and writing. So he started off in radio, but he didn't like it, so he moved over to television. I want to read another quote real quick. Basically, he's considered to be a pioneer of what television could be. So at that point, he was really working on television scripts. The new industry was grabbing up a lot of material and needed a very early propitious time to be graduating from school and getting ready to find a profession. So he's a guy who started seeing television for what it could become. And he was, like I said, he was anti-war. So a sort of through line in all of his works was trying to get away, trying to move away from conflict and military conflict. And like I said, also he was very much anti-racist. But there's two more quotes I want to read. One comes from his wife. So Sterling often said that the ultimate obscenity is not caring, not doing something about what you feel, not feeling, just drawing back and drawing in, becoming narcissistic. Which, when you watch episodes of the Twilight Zone, that is really first and foremost is the heroes are the people who are trying to do things, and the enemies are the people who either don't care or don't participate or try very hard to, kind of cover their ears and go la 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 as the world around them is changing. And then the next one is a quote from Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, who is very clearly inspired by Sterling, I think. No one can know Sterling or review or read his work without recognizing his deep affection for humanity and his determination to enlarge our horizon by giving us better understanding of ourselves. So I think about the Twilight Zone, and I think, a lot of people talk about this, is that it's an anthology show that really uses science fiction to hold up a mirror to the society of the 50s and the 60s. A world that was getting increasingly more distrusting of your neighbor. A world where we were really starting to, not the first time, but the first time on a mass scale, confronting the sins of racism and race relations, and our sort of failure to that point, and then finally sort of showing the horrors of war, how it impacts others, and how if we keep going down the path that we were going on, war was changing to the point that war was going to be much more destructive or dangerous than it had ever been. And he used a little science fiction television show to do that. It's a show that's had quite a long legacy. So basically, there have been a few attempts to reboot the Twilight Zone to varying levels of success. Rock and roll bands like Rush and other, prog rock and metal bands used Twilight Zone episodes as inspirations for songs. There have been comics that use the ideas. It's also parodied to death on such things as like The Simpsons and Family or Futurama and things like that. But it was a show by a person who really saw how stories can impact us and how stories can showcase what was wrong in our society and how, we could confront it or how we could fight it. Or in some cases, the extreme of simply doing nothing. I think Sterling, I've been putting a T in his own name. Sterling was a man who really saw a powerful, I think he's a powerful figure. I think he's an important figure. And I think that a lot of people see him as not only being an early pioneer of television, but really showing and showcasing how fiction and fantasy can impact our world. So, yeah, that's my little bit about the Twilight Zone. And then I'm going to kind of do a flip side in the next episode about another anthology show.
Right?
Do you have any questions?
Not questions. I'm just really excited to watch the Twilight Zone in its entirety.
Yeah, it's cool.
I really like it so far, and sounds like a really rad dude. Like which is usually at least maybe this season has been kind of an offshoot of what usually happens when you talk about history, but usually history is like a fucking bummer. And
yeah,
at least these last couple ones have been very like, oh, that's super sweet, or that's awesome. Like, yay, humans aren't shitty.
Yeah, and I think too, like, sometimes you have to look to the artists for that, I would argue. In a good way. Yeah. But anyway, now that we're done with this, shall we move on to the middle section? Hey everyone, welcome to the middle section. Hey, what would you do if I ever just said now we should move on to and then I just paused forever?
You waited for me? I mean, I guess at first I would see if you were there.
That's fair.
Because
that's fair.
You've been doing the intro for the middle section for so long. I'd be like, is something wrong? Do you want?
Anyway, this is the middle section. This is where we talk about social medias and stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, Cody, let's say I wanted to send you guys a message, but I didn't want to waste more than 240 characters.
Well, you're shit out of luck. No.
Damn it.
You can send us a less than 240?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the account now, because they were like, now we're going to make it bigger, and everyone's like, cool.
Okay, well, you can send... God, I can't talk. You can send a short message to our Twitter at fandomr_podcast, where you can find out stuff that's going on in our lives. Usually there are some fun quotes or silly things that we say that get brought up. Sometimes we post pictures. I'm pretty sure we just posted one of us with our last guest, which was super fun. So, checking our social media and our Twitter will keep you kind of in the loop of what's going on.
Yes. Now I want to send you a longer message.
Yes.
Where I talk about how I was much more fond of his later, Rod Serling's later works. How can I do that?
Well, you can send it via the U.S. Postal Service to Joe's address at... No. You can...
Man, if you could do that poll, I would be impressed.
Oh my god, yeah. I mean, I probably could have given the moment, but anyways. You can send it to our email at fanroulettepodcast@gmail.com.
Yes. Hey, Cody.
Yes.
I want to tell a friend about where they can listen to us, but they don't trust SoundCloud.
What? Bullshit. That's where all the hot fire is at.
That is where all the hot... Where, as opposed to the cold fire?
Yeah. Well, I mean the lukewarm fire.
Where are they keeping the cold fire these days?
Antarctica.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why aren't they sharing the cold fire with us?
Well, you don't want them to. It's starting to kind of melt the polar ice caps.
I want to be like you.
Ooh.
I want to make cold fire. It's like that scene from the Jungle Book.
The Jungle Book.
Doop 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 doop.
But anyways, if you want to tell your friends about us, you can give them our website at www.fandomroulette.com, which we just did kind of a makeover for.
Oh, yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, so you can find our episodes there, and actually all of them. It turns out there was a bug where not every single one was showing, but only the most recent ones. So
how dare that website?
Right, but it did link to our SoundCloud, so it wasn't a huge deal. But anyways, it works now. And all the way at the bottom, underneath all of or right above our social media tags, there's even a little area in case you don't want to send us your email, but you'd still like to send us a lengthy response.
Yeah, I just dropped the whole Russian hacker bit.
And you know what? I appreciate you for it.
Yeah. Hey, shit. What's the next thing we usually talk about?
We're on iTunes. We're on SoundCloud. Yeah. We're on Google Play and Spotify. All Fandom Roulette. And all of those podcatchers out there. We're on them.
And what other social medias can you find us on, Cody?
You can find us on Facebook and Instagram and Tumblr. All nice. Fandom Roulette. We do the same stuff. You know, we're posting our fun goofs, what's going on in our lives when we have the opportunity, and that's all done by our social media expert, my wife, who
his wife,
who does a really awesome job.
That's true. Yeah, they're always so much fun. I love seeing them. I love seeing the dumb things that I've said. Because as I've stated on this podcast before, I'm very much like a goldfish. I forget immediately. Like as soon as I click the stop button, I'm like, man, what did I do? I go into like a podcasting fugue state, I think.
Yeah, we're just like, and then our brains like get plugged into the matrix while we're doing this shit.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And then is that it?
That's it.
All right. Well, then it's time that we should probably go back to the show.
Welcome back. Welcome back to the actual content.
Woo! Hey, Cody.
Yeah. How you doing?
A video game character appeared.
Yeah? You don't have to do this bit anymore. Oh, no. I don't even know what that is. That could be like a simoleon.
Isn't that what Simlish sounds like?
Yeah. That was my first guess, was a sim, right?
Yeah.
Wow, I'm surprised I got that on the first guess.
He's got like a diamond over his head.
Oh, nice. Do you understand sim English?
No, I don't. But he's like staying here and he's like dancing in place.
Oh.
But there's no toilet here, so he's...
Oh, no. And then I forgot, you put him in the pool and then took out the ladder going out of the pool.
I did. Now he's drowning.
No.
You know, I have a theory.
Yeah?
That those fucking... Like Sims and the Tycoon games...
Yeah.
I might have said this on the podcast before. I don't know. I feel like those games were, like, designed to test sociopathy in children.
Yeah, and I failed miserably.
Well, but I think the thing is they realized that that we all failed, and then they were like, should we write off this generation or what should we do? And then they made the Lord of the Rings. They're like, this will teach them empathy. And so
yeah,
that's why we're broken as a people.
Oh, that's a good summary of how my life is.
You want to know what my go-to move was in Roller Coaster Tycoon?
Yeah. I
would make that like Sidewinder roller coaster.
Hell yeah.
And I would make the track as short as humanly possible.
But jack up the speed
to 100 miles per hour.
Yes.
And then I would watch as like the car like collapsed in on itself and then crashed to the ground.
Yes.
And then the other thing is my sister and I would do social experiments where we would pick up a random guest and we would put him in the far corner where like there wasn't anything. And then we would just observe to see how angry he would get.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh man, I always loved the little thing. I think we would
also drown people who like went like who gave us negative reviews.
I mean, that was if you needed to get your review up for just a small bit, like if you were right at the end of like a campaign and like you needed your review score to go up so that you could win it, you could kill a bunch of people really quickly who didn't like your park. So that your popularity would go up, but that only works for a short bit because then people are sad that people are dying. So like, you know,
yeah,
Roller Coaster Tycoon's fucking bizarre, and I loved it.
Those games are dark, man.
Yeah.
But anyway, what are you talking about, Cody?
Gosh, well, this season I've been watching some of the best movies I've ever seen, and they're all video game related.
They're all good.
And today, and I want to say this right now, Bob Hoskins, John Leguizamo, Dennis Hopper, I'm so sorry that you had to do this.
One. You watched the best one.
I watched the Super Mario Brothers movie from 1993.
Hell yeah.
And I want you to know, if they would have just removed the intro, like the title screen, and then like the weird computer CGI bullshit where they talk about the dinosaurs for a hot second, Super Mario Brothers movie, like the first 30 minutes is like an old 90s rom-com.
Hell yeah, it is.
Like, just think about it. I'm gonna put you in the headspace of like the commercial if they had made this, like Luigi Mario, an apprentice plumber with his head in the clouds, meets the girl of his dreams, Daisy, an archaeologist with a go-get-it attitude. Yep. Will Luigi screw this up by not being able to talk to her, or will his brother Mario save the day?
Hell yeah.
Like,
it's a good premise, huh?
Yeah, and like that's the first 30 minutes of the movie. It's just them like, you know, we're plumbers. Luigi meets this, you know, super cute, super nice girl, but he can't talk to her, so his brother, like, you know, saves the day. And then, like, after that 30 minutes, fucking nosedives into my first sci-fi thriller movie, complete with evolved dinosaurs, Goombas, and King Koopa, who was a T-Rex, now is Dennis Hopper, and is looking to take over the other dimension, lording over a very destroyed land currently. Like, what the fuck happened? It's great.
It's the best.
And you know what? The movie tries so hard to be a Super Mario Brothers movie that it fails to see the semi-decent campy sci-fi thriller that it almost was. I feel like someone said this to me, that this is kind of like children's Blade Runner.
It really is, though.
Yeah, and what's even more bizarre is it's weird to think of how much effort they put into creating the alternate universe. Because think about it. It's an alternate universe where the dinosaurs evolved instead of primates and humans and whatever. And a lot of it was destroyed. But notice, and this is the first time I thought about it, they had electric cars Because they don't have oil.
Yeah.
Because oil is dead dinosaurs. My wife yesterday and I discovered that we drive exploding dinosaurs.
Yeah, pretty much.
Every day.
Good movie, huh?
Yeah. And it's so weird with like the weird gun phone system that they incorporate at one point.
Yeah.
All the weird things that they eat that they mention quite a lot in a very weird way. Like, they didn't need to do any of that because modern day video game movies are just like, fuck it, these kids are dumb, give them the Blue Hedgehog and Gangster's Paradise. Here you go. There's your movie.
That really stuck with you, huh?
Yeah, I'm still mad about it. But anyways, it's weird that the Super Mario Brothers movie has a strangely unique, chaotic, like, alternate dimension for the Mario Brothers to get stuck in and, like, have to deal with. And, like...
It's kind of beautiful, isn't it?
It is! Like, don't get it twisted, I hate the movie. But there are so many, like, good things that are, like, hidden in this movie that, like...
I don't understand. Why do you hate it? It's so good.
Honestly, if they would have taken another pass at the script, I actually think, and just remove all of the Mario Brothers references, you have a decent 90s campy sci-fi thriller. I'm not kidding. And
then you put back in the Mario and you have the best. Hey, remember that time?
Do you remember the time that Bob-Ombs were sponsored by Reebok?
Hell yeah. Do you remember when he, like, turns his machine on one of his mooks and he makes a Goomba? Because as we all know, Goombas are, like, fucking huge.
Oh my god, the Goombas are scary. And you know what? Surprisingly enough, watching it again, whatever they did to make the Goomba, like, you know, the practical effects for the Goombas, because they're not all the same, like... You know, they're not all the same head.
Yeah.
Like, they're actually surprisingly good. Not bad, not bad work. I mean...
Practical effects are where it's at, man.
Yeah, and the characters are kind of whatever. I weirdly, like, as a kid, I liked Luigi a lot because he's kind of, like, he's, you know, like I said earlier, he's got his kind of head in the clouds and he's like, oh, you gotta believe, like, that's his whole thing. Like, he's basically an early onset conspiracy theorist who can't talk to girls. But then...
I can relate.
But then, as I watched it again, I actually really liked Mario because he's just kind of like this hardworking dad who's, like, really grounded and, like, sometimes gets angry when dinosaurs try to arrest him.
I mean, who doesn't get angry when dinosaurs try to arrest you?
Yeah, and
he's a hard-working guy.
Yeah, he's great. I mean, this is by no means, like, the worst movie I've ever watched. Trust me by that. As a kid, I fucking loved this movie, and
me too.
Mostly because I didn't understand movies, and the fact that it was just a Mario movie was, like, super jazzy, but, like...
That's all you needed.
And I think one of the worst things about this movie that I still, like, in my head, I'll remember this till the day I die, is that their full names are Mario and Luigi Mario.
Well, yeah, of course, Cody.
Because they're the Mario brothers.
It's true.
You
know what? Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Do you think that was a long day in the writer's room?
Oh my god. Honestly, I think at one point they came up with that cool, like, police scene and they're like, yes, perfect. Isn't it going to be weird that they're only calling themselves Mario and Luigi and everyone was just like, what the fuck do we do now?
And then someone was like, well, they're the Mario brothers, right? And someone was like, yeah. They're like, okay, so their names are Mario, and Luigi Mario. And someone was like, okay, cool. And then they just did a bunch of cocaine.
Yeah, it had to have been. Honestly, it was actually fun to watch it again Like, it's
Yeah.
not as bad as I remember it to be. There are some scenes that are pretty bad, though. I'm looking at basically any scene with Iggy and Spike in it is just awful. Just awful. It just shows, like, how much those characters were not necessary to that movie.
Good stuff.
But I stand by what I said. I think if, which, I was looking up the writers, because I'm like, who wrote this movie? Because you almost had it. But, like, you just got sucked into, like, the whole Mario thing. And the two writers, there's two of them, and they don't have a lot on their plate. I think one of them, unfortunately, died fairly early on in their career.
Oh, that is a bummer.
That is a bummer.
I take back my cocaine joke.
Well, not. It was I guess it was a plain thing. I don't know, but
okay.
Either way,
Then the joke still stands.
I think they wrote like 2 or 3 movies that I didn't recognize, and then one of them was a writer / artist for Playboy / National Lampoon. If memory serves.
Sure.
I might edit this in post, depending on if I fuck that up real bad. But like I said,
you're right.
Another pass, and like remove like the fact that it needed to be a Mario movie, and target it one step up, PG-13R. Don't think this would have been a half bad movie in '93. I think we'd have a whole I think that's the golden timeline that we're not in, is where the writers went back and they're like, all right, like, we have to make this a Super Mario Brothers movie, but let's keep pulling back and, like, put more, like, weird sci-fi campy shit in there. Because
then, like, the trailer's like, in a world. And it's like, the only thing is, like, it's a guy and he's, like, wearing, like, a black duster, and then he looks up and goes, it's a me, Mario.
Oh my god, do you, this side tangent. Do you remember the unofficial Smash web series from years ago?
Like Brawl in the Family or whatever?
Something like that. It was like a gritty, it was a gritty noir web series about all of the characters, like Smash Brothers was it was basically all of the Nintendo worlds were like connected in some way, and so
oh sure,
Mario was like a detective, I think, and his brother, and like Luigi, I think, was like an alcoholic or whatever, and like everyone from Smash was like in these like fucking web series. It was wild. It wasn't well produced, but I just loved the gritty noir style that it had going for it. Like, I think Ness and Kirby were serial killers. Like,
I never watched it, but it sounds like 100% my jam. So.
Yeah. But guys, Super Mario Brothers movie wasn't that bad?
Yeah.
Wasn't as bad as I was expecting it to be. I
forget, does Yoshi show up in it?
Yes, Yoshi does show up and gets fucking stabbed in the goddamn back by Koopa's second in command.
Yeah.
Cause he has cause like at first it's just like, it's kind of like this cute hybrid Yoshi / Velociraptor looking motherfucker. And he just kind of like makes cute noises and you're like, oh, it's Yoshi, it's cute. And then finally, he gets like intimidated by that lady because she's like about to like fucking put a knife into Daisy or whatever, and then his fucking long tongue comes out and he pulls her across the room, and I was like, damn, Yoshi, where the fuck have you been packing that tongue? It was so good. But then it was like sad because like at one point he comes back and he's like limping around with his fucking knife in his back, and it's like, damn, it's fucking dark.
What a movie. I'm looking at images of it right now, and I'm just so happy.
Yeah, I wanted it to be good. I mean, younger me was like, yeah, Mario's good. But it's...
Oh, Dennis Hopper, what did they do to your face?
Yeah, they did it, like... they really...
Oh my god. Oh, I'm going to send you the Japanese poster when we're done, and then we're going to post that to our Twitter.
Yes. So anyways, that's the Super Mario Brothers movie, 1993. Could have been something, but
And it was. Dun, 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 dun.
Oh boy.
Man. Okay, Cody.
Yeah.
I have an idea.
Yes.
I'm going to pretend like we didn't talk about this before.
Okay. Yeah.
episode.
Okay, pretending.
Right.
I forgot. What?
Oh, yeah. So you know our new game, A Group of Adventurers?
Yes, the ever evolving,
Adventurers?
ever the fan favorite.
Yeah. So we're gonna let the folks at home play, and now like put in like some fucking like theme song, like game show music.
I'm gonna put
like
one shitty like.
Live from the attic where Joe records. It's you and a group of adventurers. Now Joe and Cody won't be giving the answer in the episode. They're gonna give it at the top of the next episode.
Yeah, so that the audience can play.
So you guys can play along at home. So if you want to play along at home, either take a guess on our Facebook or use the hashtag fandom our adventures with your guess of the answer to the question that we ask in our episode. Man,
this was a good explanation, let me tell you.
I feel like I did a great job.
For those of you just turning in, we have moved on from the Garbage Kid, as it's been yeah.
I'm doing quiet music behind you as you're explaining.
Yeah, so we have moved on to a game that we have kind of coined You and a Group of Adventurers, where we pose a kind of an elevator pitch summary of a tabletop role-playing game campaign idea. But you have to guess what movie, comic, video game, or other pop culture medium that it's from or based off of.
Yeah.
I think
so
that's
week,
it.
It's mine.
Yeah, I'm guessing.
All right.
And I'm going to be real bad at this.
So, you and a group of adventurers need to locate a lost friend before an important event.
Now, have we decided the rules are we can ask for the genre?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Let's do that.
Yeah, what is the genre, and do we have any hero classes that you'd find in the good old Dungeons and Dragons?
It is a movie.
Okay, it's a movie.
I was like thinking about it, and like,
if they don't fit it and they're just NPCs, that's fine. That's enough information for me.
I'll say I could give a couple of backgrounds.
Sure, we can do that.
One I would argue is very much a charlatan.
Okay.
One I would argue is a scholar, and the last one is like a weirdo, which I know isn't necessarily a background, but they should really. Man, why don't they have like a weirdo background? Like, I mean, I suppose everyone just ends up playing a weirdo anyway.
Yeah, to be fair,
like,
you can turn any of those backgrounds into also a weirdo.
That's okay. Fair enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
Movie.
and
then, gosh.
Would you like me to read it one more time?
Yeah, read it one more time for me.
All right. You and a group of adventurers need to locate your lost friend before an important event.
I think I just got it.
Yeah.
But I won't say it here. I will.
All
I
right.
will. I will pose my guess. All right. I'm gonna write my guess down
Okay.
in case I'm totally wrong, so that next week you can laugh at me, audience.
Nah. All right. So we wrote it down.
Yes, I'm writing it
All right.
down.
So please post in the Facebook or tweet at us with your answer using the hashtag #FandomRAdventures.
Yeah. This is really fun. I enjoy this game a lot.
Yeah, and I like the fact that we're like letting because it hit me after the last one was like because like I think there were two and I had trouble with like one of the two.
Yeah.
I only wrote one for this time, but
Well,
I
did
like,
that the extra one because we had a guest. So
oh, that's fair. Okay,
yeah,
fair
we
enough.
normally do. We've been doing one that was a exception to the rule because we had some time to kill.
That's fair. So yeah, tweet us your answers or anything like that. We'd love to hear you. And then at the top of the next episode, during the intro, we will
give
you the answer.
Yeah.
And we'll read people who get it right. How about that?
Ooh.
That's your incentive.
Incentive.
We'll give you a shout out on the pod.
Yeah.
Hey Cody.
Yeah.
Do you hear the sound? Ring, 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 ring.
Oh, I
ring,
smell
ring.
the classic smell of those smelly markers.
Yeah, smelly markers.
The smelly markers and a new notebook.
Pencil pouch.
Oh yeah, pencil pouch,
keeper.
and it just smells weirdly of pencils and erasers, which
yeah,
it's
bad smell.
Yeah, it's not great.
It's time to go to class. That was bad sound.
Oh man, it's not our best.
I'm sorry. I thought it was gonna work.
I mean,
it was
hey,
gonna work better.
Guys, welcome to our class section on the podcast. So during the D&D,
you just said the word class, and a big man with a big burly beard ran in. He started shout about the Communist Manifesto.
Oh yeah, that class.
I'm sorry, it's just no.
God,
I'm falling apart over it. My bits are so bad this week.
So once
someone stole all my bit juice.
Oh no, the bit juice.
No.
What? I'm gonna ask a gross question. What does your bit juice taste like?
No. Bad.
Sorry, everybody. That's about as bad as it gets.
Thanks everyone for joining us on our last episode of Phantom Relay.
No.
We're gonna end this bad boy on a cliffhanger. You're never gonna know what you and a group of adventurers are.
So this week, we decided, or once during a season, we do a relook at the classes because we during the blunder years, as I like to call it, of season 0, we looked at the sorcerer classes, or god damn it, we looked at the classes. And
we're putting on our swim trunks. We're getting up to the high dive.
Yeah, and we're re-looking at them because we were young, naive.
That was a bad bit too, huh?
I mean, all of these bits are bad.
I'm falling apart, Karen.
And this week we're gonna go back and re-look at the Sorcerer from Dungeons and Dragons, specifically the 5th edition.
Whoa.
Yeah. Do you want me to start?
Join us, won't you? Yeah, go ahead.
So, you're probably wondering, as most people are, what the fuck is a sorcerer? And in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, there are several spellcasting classes that kind of feel the same, at least upon first glance. There's the wizard, the sorcerer, and the warlock and bard.
Warlock. Yeah.
Kind of. I mean, bard has a unique flavor, but mechanically it seems to dip a little bit, but sorcerers have this innate ability to cast spells. Their bodies are a conduit for magic, and their force of personality can be used to their benefit. And in 5e, they have 2 unique features that, in my opinion, differentiate them from the wizard, from the warlock, and from basically the other classes, which is their bloodline and their meta magic.
Yes.
While
Those very cool things.
Exactly. While most casters either pick a school or a specific patron, the sorcerer is unique in that since the magic comes from within, they get to pick their source of power. We may have briefly gone over this a little bit, but with the expansion of like Xanathar's Guide to Everything, Sword Coast Adventure Guide, the sorcerer has a lot of unique options, whether you're, gaining your magic from an all-powerful dragon or a deity of one of the gods. You get a special abilities and spells that are augmented by this source, which is very unique to this class. And then, while they don't have the versatility of a wizard with a giant spell book filled with spells, they make up for it with this thing called meta magic, which sounds like a bunch of gobbledygook, but basically, sorcerers get to...
It is.
And it is, because it's a tabletop role-playing game. But no, they get to use a resource called sorcery points that basically can alter their spells. So and you get, access to a couple of different ones, but depending on what meta magics you pick, they can do stuff as, casting a spell in complete silence when normally it would require your voice, or, waving your hands in a very particular fashion, or weaving a dangerous fireball to avoid hitting your friends who happen to be in the blast zone.
That's the big one, I think.
Now, I've personally never played a sorcerer.
Neither have I.
Haven't gotten to that point yet, but I would like to. I like the idea of, picking a bloodline and, like, kind of fighting against it, like having a character type where you fight against this, like, kind of heritage that you've, kind of unfortunately been born into. That sounds like a fun character to play. I think in terms of, like, DM stuff, I think sorcerers have it pretty good. I feel like there's a lot of classes that, like, there needs to be a lot of footwork, or they need kind of help to really kind of bring themselves up to other classes, but sorcerers kind of have that neat spot where they kind of already have that in the game, but it does pose some, things as a DM you should think about, like, how magic manifests itself in a sorcerer. In my games, magic is completely unique, and even more so for sorcerers since it comes from within. Asking the players what their spells look like is a really cool way to engage your players and to get them invested into their characters a little bit, whether it's, shooting, beams of rainbows out of your hands to, performing, like, weird Latin and making complex hand gestures. There's a lot of interesting ways to make spellcasters unique to that person.
Yeah.
I think it's also important, especially when you're doing a custom game, about how people perceive the classes and in this case, sorcerers, because in traditional D&D lore, the thing that I picked up is, like, wizards and sorcerers kind of have a very spotty relationship. Sorcerers often perceive wizards to be this kind of, like, uptight, distant, like, spellcaster. Like, they're not really here in the moment. They're all about book learning, and they're just big nerds. Where
they're right.
And, sure, they're right, but wizards see it the other way around, where sorcerers are kind of this sloppy, untrained, like, there's some animosity there. And that begs the question, are sorcerers hated for being naturally gifted, and are they outlawed? Are they revered as higher beings by having this ability? Does nobility come to those who are gifted with special bloodlines? And like I said, I've said this before, it may not work for everybody, and it may not come up and play quickly, but could lead to interesting encounters having these things thought up. My example, I wrote 2 of them down, being like, a village chief wants the party dead after realizing that this sorcerer is actually a sorcerer, and now they have to, like, get out of town or have to deal with the village chief who thinks they're, like, an abomination to magic. Or, maybe the party gets a invite and the nobles invite them to dinner because of their prestigious status of being a sorcerer, offering them a job that otherwise they wouldn't have gotten. Like, there are some unique ways to make sorcerers interesting, and I think as a DM, it is our responsibility to get people to be excited about the classes they play.
Yeah.
At least from a narrative storytelling perspective. Also, and this is my last bit before, we can have our thoughts, and then I have a little gripe about the sorcerer. From a world building standpoint, it also helps to know where these bloodlines come from, and even and in a interesting way, invite the player to help with this. I think that's part of the character building process, but like, like you guys coming up with stuff, like maybe there's a shadow sorcerer who comes, and their powers come from a great-great-grandmother who lived in the Shadowfell for a time, or maybe, maybe their divine blood comes from a unicorn that they saved by happenstance or whatever. These are all things you can like come up with, and those ties, and bringing them into the story as like things that people can learn. Maybe something that they like, maybe that unicorn shows up, is like, yo bro, you're fucking dope, peace. Like, those are great ways to introduce characters' backstories in interesting ways so that they're like, hey, this is pretty rad.
I liked all the points that you said, Cody.
Yeah.
They were all very good. I will say two things that I focused on as I was reading about this was magical source. And I thought a lot about the difference between sorcerers and wizards as well. And like wizards are very much like someone who has trained and studied, and I believe anyone can be a wizard, right?
It is implied that you can learn to become a wizard, and like with enough training and study that like anybody can weave the chaotic magic that stirs within the background.
Yeah, whereas like sorcerers, like it's something you're born with. And it might manifest like later in your life, like you might not be a little kid doing magic all the time or anything like that, but there is something that I think really sells the unique aspect of the sorcerer really well. It's 3 words: wild magic table.
It's funny that you say this.
Is that your gripe with
this? This is my gripe with the sorcerer class.
Interesting.
But go on. I'll explain my thing after you. I want to hear why you like this table.
I think it's interesting because I think it really drives or sells the difference between wizards and sorcerers, right? Because sorcerers are channeling something that you might have had only a little bit of training in, and as you advance and things like that, I might see where your gripe comes in, but I think it's interesting that you're more like a conduit of magic versus like a person who is actively controlling it. And so the idea that you can that the magic can hurt you as much as it can help you, I think is an interesting thing, because it makes you not necessarily question your relationship to magic, because if you're choosing to be a sorcerer, I think it just kind of drives home the fact that you are potentially a character who might, no matter how unintentionally, be dangerous. Which drives those conflicts that you were talking about earlier, especially between like wizards and sorcerers, or that might be why a leader of a small town might find you terrifying when they find out they're a sorcerer. Because the last sorcerer that came through saved the day, but what was that? As soon as everything was expended, the gigantic fireball came and like burned down their village green or whatever. I think it's an interesting idea that really sells the wild nature of your magic. Whereas like other forms of magic, you're channeling it through something. So wizards, you're channeling it through study. Warlock, you're channeling it through a dark, or an eldritch being, clerics a good eldritch being, and bard like music or druid nature or things like that. In this case, you are simply channeling it through existence, which means that sometimes it can manifest itself in unique ways. So like I think of it in terms of like a lot of times when you're reading like comics or things like that, especially like mutants like X-Men or things like that, there are times where they can't control their own mutant powers. Which is why, sometimes they get a reputation, especially when the powers first manifest themselves as young children. That's why so many people fear them, is because they can't control them, So, for instance, Cyclops being a young man blasting away with his, eyes, not being able to control it. That's really scary, and that's not something that he's necessarily trained for or trained. And, sometimes it comes up later in comics that sometimes he has moments where he lacks control of that. I view it very similar to like mutation in the Marvel universe. A power that is something that is very powerful and very beautiful, but also something that can become dangerous. So yeah, that's my thoughts on wild magic. So.
And that was such a beautiful way of describing why I love wild magic sorcerers thematically. I think so. Like, that's the thing, right? Is like, I love this idea that like, you're a conduit for all of this energy that like sometimes it comes off in very chaotic ways. What my gripe is about 5e's wild magic system is that it's, in my opinion, it's not wild enough.
Oh, interesting.
So for those of you uninformed, basically what happens is there are very specific moments where when a sorcerer is casting a spell as a wild magic sorcerer, they occasionally will roll on what's called the wild magic table. And when they cast the spell, something extra happens. Like, it could be something as mundane as like your skin turns blue, but it also can be something as dangerous as casting a fireball on yourself and, potentially murderballing you.
Yeah.
And I love this. I love the theme of wild magic, and I love this mechanic of like, there's kind of this high risk, high reward style game that's coming on, because a lot of what makes you roll on that table is taking buffs. So it's this kind of like almost delicate game of like, how much power am I willing to take before I accidentally fireball myself? Or like turn myself into a potted plant. And I think the problem is, at least in 5e, it's a little noodly. So one of the things is that every time a player casts a spell that's above a cantrip, which is like the very base level magic, they roll a d20, and on a 1, the wild magic table happens. So once every, it's what, a 5% chance to every spell cast potentially roll on the wild magic table. And for the most part, the wild magic table is pretty like silly, for a lack of a better term. It's got a lot of like, you every time you talk, their bubbles come out and your skin turns blue, and like a lot of silly things. And there's not a whole lot of like crazy strong or crazy deadly, besides like the fireball or the potted plant. And you roll so infrequently on that table that you almost forget it's there. Because we had, in our last game, one of our players was a wild magic sorcerer for a hot minute. And she didn't enjoy the style of play because she wasn't particularly stronger than the rest of her party. And she wasn't making any risky, like, she wasn't able to make risky choices with the wild magic. It just is kind of like an inconvenience that happens if you either A, take a little bit of power, or B, roll a 1. And so I think there's a better way. I think first and foremost, the table that's presented could be scaled a little differently. by having maybe a couple more powerful things that can happen that may be mechanic, like gaining sorcery points or gaining mana slots back. Like being like, yeah, if you roll in 100 on the wild magic table, you get your spell slots back.
Yeah.
And then
Actually,
at the very...
You get sorcery points if you roll 100.
Yeah, or like all the way at the bottom is like, yeah, you lose all your hit die or something. Like some pretty detrimental stuff, and having abilities that are like, hey, I want to use the... Like, the characters should want to use the wild magic table because there is that chance, that risk-reward situation where it's like, I could get something super rad, and there's some cool stuff on there. Sure. But you don't get it that often, and oftentimes it's based on the DM to decide what, like, when they roll on that table. And to me, that feels like that's already a lot of work for the Dungeon Master to not only have a story and talk in character or, talk to the players and all that kind of stuff. Like, there's a lot on their plate already, and making them decide when they roll on a table to turn themselves into a potted plant, to me, feels silly. Like, there should be an easy to understand mechanical way to roll on that table, and I feel like that table should have a couple of things added to it to make it like an interesting roll, because sometimes it's like, cool, I finally rolled on that table, I blow bubbles when I talk. Like, that feels like such a boring thing to have happened. And then granted, it beats blowing yourself up, but like when you're using it so infrequently, it makes almost no sense to add things like your skin turns blue for the sake of the haha funnies. Because like you can just role play that out as like a sorcerer flaw.
Yeah.
Or like a sorcery quirk is like everyone gets a quirk, and like sometimes it's like when I cast spells, my skin turns blue for a second. Like there are other ways to do those like haha roleplay element things without attaching them to something that could be interesting but otherwise kind of falls a little short in my head.
Fair enough. I had an idea, but it could make the sorcerer too powerful. Where it's like you can allow them to attempt to cast spells like one level above what they currently are. But then they have to roll on the wild magic table. Yeah,
like there are some I think there's some cool things you can do to get the player to like, hey, you can have this really cool thing, but you're gonna roll on this table, and some of those things are not good.
Yeah, or like potentially like a magic item that forces them to roll on the table.
Yeah. I think there are some interesting ways to do the wild magic sorcerer that thematically is like, yeah, this is dangerous. I could save the day, but I can also kill myself in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are some cool moments that could be had there. I just think they needed to tweak the table and make it so that there's a mechanic within the sorcery where you can get this extra thing, but you gotta roll on that table.
Yeah.
And like the table could be, and maybe if it'll feel strong if you add like good things that also happen, like you gain all your hit points back, like you're full health now. But then also like there can also be the time where they're like, I really need to like save the princess. I gotta cast the spell. And then, whoops, I saved the princess, but I also like restrained myself and sent myself to another dimension for a minute. So like, I'm kind of fucked right now. But those are my gripes. I think thematically, I love the wild magic sorcerer, and I'd love to play that class if the mechanics didn't feel very like cool. I'm kind of like a subpar sorcerer with like this table that I occasionally roll on.
That's fair.
But anyhow,
I'd be interested to try out a sorcerer as well, but maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, one day down the line. Shall we wrap her up?
Yep.
Thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of Fandom Roulette. This was this was a fun one, I think.
This is super fun.
Please tweet your thoughts to the answer for you and a group of adventurers. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. please go back to our middle section to learn a little bit more about our social media. Reach out, ask us questions, talk to us. We're here to talk to you. We'd love to hear back from you guys, because at the end of the day, we're doing this for you guys. So
yeah.
Signing off for Fandom Roulette. This is Joe,
And I'm Cody.
and as always, stay nerdy,
Stay super nerdy.